Chief Executive of Vegans. Hi, my name is Ian Soers. I'm Chief Executive of Vegans, a charity that cares for vulnerable children and families, mainly doing counselling for kids and working with parents. And one of the things that is a real common denominator in the work that we do is, as we're working with people who are struggling in family life, poverty is a continuous thing. Now, that doesn't actually depend on how much money they earn or where they live. Actually, we've worked with quite wealthy clients in one respect, but actually poverty struck them and they're bound. And other times we're working in high rises and actually people are really struggling. And because of the financial worries, it begins to just peter out into the rest of their life. And because of that, I'm delighted to welcome Michael Gilmore, the $7 millionaire, who's written a book called Happy Ever After, Financial Freedom. And I'm excited particularly to speak to Michael because actually this is an area of gross ignorance for me. So not only does it impact on the work that we do and the families that we care for, but actually I've got a personal and vested interest in this. Good afternoon, Michael. Really good to welcome you to Dad.info.
That's great to be here. Thanks very much. I mean, it's something that, you know, I got into working in finance. I've been working in finance for almost 25 years now, but I got in kind of by accident. I was working as a journalist, and I had to basically get up to speed incredibly quickly on finance. I was ignorant, didn't want to know anything about it actually, and I was already in my late 20s by that point, and I had to go report onto sort of research department and a trading floor, and I had no idea. I thought I'd go, okay, give myself a couple of months to get everything, but then they said start on Monday, so I gave myself a weekend to try and get through the basic facts. And there's so much jargon and so much people acting overly arrogant and confident in the financial sector that a lot of us outside of it are really scared and put off it. And also we're not taught it. I mean, and none of this stuff is ever taught to us in school. And I realized within like a month, I'd learned so much that wasn't particularly complicated. I mean, really, really simple things, like how to divide one thing by another, and then call that a ratio that does this and this. That was actually quite easy. And so what I realized was, like, I've been doing it maybe a month or so, and I thought, well, one, this is all quite easy. Two, it's really important. This stuff is life-changing. You know, this really, if these tools were in everyone's hands, people could make very, very different life decisions. Yeah. And so then sort of third thing that sort of swept over. So one, it's not hard. Two, it's important. And then three, the overwhelming sense of anger that we're all not taught this, that this isn't just basic to all of us right from the very beginning. It's school in some point. And so I, full-time job, young kids, tucked that thought away for quite some time. And probably about 10 years ago, I started working with some migrant worker groups here in Singapore to work on their financial literacy. So I was building courses for them and teaching them, really, because they leave their homes behind and they travel to a very expensive place to try and earn more money. They're trying to solve poverty for their families, one person, one family at a time. And they give up so much. And I've seen surveys that say that 95% of them go home without achieving their financial goals. Really only 5% actually manage to do what they want to do. So working with groups to help that. But then about 5 years ago, I was looking at my daughter, 17, about to go off to college, and she doesn't know any of it either. I thought, I've got like a year left to get all of this into her head to the point where she knows how to manage her life financially, why it's important, what the key things are. And again, the anger came back. I thought, how did she get through 17 years of, well, at that point, not 17, but let's say 13 years of schooling, without any of that being taught? That happened. And so and I thought, well, one thing I'm not going to do is lecture her every weekend, because I've maybe got a year with her before she never comes back again after college. I'm not going to ruin our last year together by me lecturing her about money. I'll be finance dad and, rolling eyes every weekend. So that's when I started writing it all down. So this is what I need you to know. And so very, very quickly became a fairy tale. And what is a fairy tale? What isn't a fairy tale? Which bits do you understand and which bits can you believe and which bits can't you? So that's how we got into that. And that's really, so I feel like everyone else, as you said, we don't understand money. You don't understand bits of it. Other people you talk to don't understand bits of it. And I came from exactly the same place, which is why I always try and focus on, okay, let's make this approachable. let's put it into a way that we can understand these simple things and use them.
All right. So what's in the book? What's in the, because you've written, the book for a 17-year-old about to go off to college. But here I am, 52 years old, not about to go off to college. What's in the book? What would make me read it? How have you set that out?
Okay, so the end goal, what I wanted to teach her, she's an artistic kid. The time she was writing a play that was going to go to, when she went to college, then she was writing plays that went to Edinburgh. And I thought, oh, well, she's never going to make any money. She's going to really need to know how to be independent and manage her money all the way through. So there's a movement mainly in the US, but it's spreading globally, called FIRE, which stands for financially independent, retire early. I think a lot of people get hooked on the retire part, particularly I'm exactly the same age as you, 52 myself. Retiring sounds quite good at our age, but the more important bit, I think, is financially independent. And the idea that there is just a number that you can calculate to know if you're financially independent, and that is you need 25 times your annual spending in some form of asset. Now that comes off a thing called the 4% rule, which is you can take 4% of your assets out every year and they'll last forever. Now it's a big dream to have that number, but to me it was this idea of that's such a easy calculation. We can all actually do that. And I thought, well, if I could teach my daughter that she could, before she ever even starts of thinking work, she could have a goal, and that would be a great goal to aim at. Then you can choose. Then you can just write plays, and they need never make any money, because you've got yourself sorted out earlier in your career. And so what the book does is really lead towards that point. But I structured a thing called mission. I'm just using as an acronym, or so mission stands for money, income, saving, spending, investing, owning, and then the last one, now, because it's all built around the concept of compounding your returns, and that's how you build wealth. And that takes time. So the only time to start is now. And that's what I was really aiming to teach her, was to get to that point. And so it was really about taking her on a journey in that sort of old-fashioned fairy tale way. How do you get out of the woods? If you try not to get into the woods to start with, but know you've got a path and stick to that path and give her a very simple path. So that maybe answers for her. For you, there is actually ways of doing it, of fast tracking it. You have to really cut back on your spending, but that's actually the beauty of the way we look at it. Is there are people who retire in just 8 years straight from school, and the maths is very, very simple. You can actually, in 8 years, you can save enough to retire. Most people would take, maybe if they're aggressive, they take 15, 16 years, but 8 years is possible. 52, you could be done by 60.
So that's the dream. But your book is really aiming at saying, look, this isn't a get rich quick. This is really about a journey, and it's not a dream. You could actually do it. And I often talk about the difference between a vision and a dream. And a dream is something, if you like, over the horizon. A dream is often for other people. You can't touch it. It's intangible. A vision is something where it's like, think, I'm going to build a building there. I'm going to build a skyscraper. I've never built a skyscraper, but I can build and I've got a map and a kind of a sketch plan. And I think the difference between a dream is, one day I'd love to do that. And a vision is saying, here's the plan, and I've got some bricks. I haven't got it right now, but if I start work today, then in a few years I've got it. And that's what really struck me about this, is it's not a dream. It's a vision, Do you want to just take us on that journey, that 10-year journey? What does that look like? I mean, how much pain is involved? Let's say for a 15-year journey, in terms of cutting back, what does that look like?
Well, exactly. It actually involves saving half of your income every single year.
All right, you heard it here first.
Now the ones that I mentioned earlier on, there, I know this couple in the US, Joe and Ali Olson. So they were teachers, and this is one of the reasons why it's so important to reach kids before they start work, because there is this. Some people call it hedonic adaptation, the fact that we constantly change our lives to spend more money. I actually love the term lifestyle creep, because it just sounds.
No, I would agree, absolutely.
And going back is so hard to actually save, to cut back on your spending. But these guys, Joe and Ali Olson, they made the simplest decision you've ever heard. They basically had a conversation with her. They were getting married as they were leaving college, and they said, did we have such a bad time in college? Could we live on what we lived on when we were in college? And if we could, how much could we save? So between them, they were making 80,000 US a year. They were doing side jobs to do that, but they carried on living on 20,000 a year, super strictly. That meant they were saving 3 years of spending every year. They were saving that. They were out in 8 years and retired and traveling the world with their kid and just with their costs super low, keeping that very, very, it's called lean fire, that version, but to achieve it as quickly as they can. Now, that's one model. The other one is, it's 50% is probably like, the halfway house, because, in reality, 25% is what governments tend to recommend.
They do. Pensions, absolutely, they do.
Yeah. So 50% is probably like the nice midway point of being like really quite aggressive, but not all the way to insane 25%, which is actually what I talked to my daughter about. I said, look, aim for that. You're 20, when you start work at 22, you could be out by 37. And so she's now been working 6 months. So she's got a job. She's working 6 months. She put half of her salary away in her first month, and she's done it every month since. And now 6 months in, she's like, really, I have to do 15 years of this. So she's like, it's, she understands. She really understands it. And because she didn't blow it every month right at the very beginning, she hasn't adapted into spending it all, which is, from my perspective, the book has done its job. I don't know why I'm even talking to you. My target market of 1.
It's 100% success.
Exactly. It's only downhill from here, right? That's why really that sort of focus on that. But I love what you said about vision as well. I mean, that's the thing I wanted to put into her mind, that just not dreams, right? Not fairy tales. There are actually achievable things. There are steps toward them. And that's why it's actually why I don't use my name in this. The book is by the $7 Millionaire, and the $7 Millionaire was from a moment when I was talking about compounding with her. And she just asked me, so, okay, well, what's the smallest amount it would take me what's the smallest amount I would need to save every day to become a millionaire in my career? And so I Googled it, no answers, got the spreadsheet out, worked it out. So it was $7 or £7. Between 20 and 70, £7 a day, put into markets, not into the bank. It won't make any money in the bank. Put into markets where it should get a 7% return, long-term average. That would turn into £1 million over a 50-year period. And that's actually why I use that as a name, because it's an achievable goal, which you don't think is achievable. I didn't grow up thinking I could be a millionaire. Shit. And I saw the look on her face. She was like, oh, I could do $7. I could actually do that. That's achievable. And it's I literally could just see a light go on, and I said, oh, I could do that. That's an achievable goal now. And that's why I use it as my pseudonym, $7 Millionaire, because like, what's the daily goal? What's the first step? $7. Where do you get to? $1 million. And it's just that sort of simple messaging, because it's all about the psychology.
Just before, because we want to talk about how we talk to our children about finances, and obviously that's the heart of what you've done. But before we get there, I know some people will be listening saying, he doesn't understand my finances. He doesn't understand my particular situation. Do you want to speak into that for those that, are, really struggling financially, and saying, I get that, I get the maths, I get, but it couldn't work for me. Did you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do, because I think it's really important. And I don't want, one of the words I try and use very carefully is I always try and talk about this being simple, not easy. There's an enormous difference between those two things. The maths is very simple. The structure is very simple. It's not going to be easy for everyone. But the thing that I think is most important is number one, we have to let go of any sort of psychological things holding us back on this. Blaming ourselves is a massive element to money problems for many people. Probably given the name of the show, I probably shouldn't swear, but there's a habit. Let's go. What the F it? which is when you've started doing something, you just continue. It's like the reverse of a positive streak. It's like, when you've eaten the one dessert, you just give up on the diet and eat for the next 2 months. It's a very negative habit to have, and when a lot of us have it with money, and it's just not the case. It's about learning those psychological steps. And that's where I'd say that for anyone that listens and says, that doesn't apply to me, I've got bigger problems than that, I really can't do any of this. Number one, I genuinely sympathize. I don't want you to think that this is all for middle class and everything else. The key is actually you can develop the habit, maybe not the numbers, but you can develop the psychological skills. The psychological skills are everything. If you can't save £7 a day, can you save 1? Can you save 50p? And can you do that every single day? Can you do it for a month? Can you do it for 2? Can you do it for 5? Because the habits are actually the most important part, because as you develop those, you'll start to build them. You'll start to build extra onto that. The first and biggest habit for me is always tracking spending. Most of us actually have no idea what we actually spend our money on. And if you ask anyone, there's psychological tests on this all the time. It's like, give a person a list of 10 things, and 5 minutes later they can only name 6 or 7 of them. Now, ask someone what were the 100 things you spent money on in the last week, you're going to get maybe like 30-40%. To actually understand that properly, you need to track it. And once you can track it, you can then start to say, you know what, I probably could cut a little bit of this. I could cut a little bit here. If not a problem. You've actually developed the habit of tracking. This puts you one step ahead of everyone who doesn't do that. That's the first habit we can all do, and it costs nothing. It costs a piece of paper and a pen just to actually track your spending, so that you'll know when you do have excess, when you have misspent, you'll know, and you can, rather than beating yourself up psychologically about the misspending, you can look at it as a target for future and say, okay, next week I'm not doing that. Next week I'm going to save this much money by not doing that one piece of misspending. And it puts us in control. It takes us away from that dumb argument about millennials buying lattes and avocado toast and therefore not being able to buy houses in Chelsea and all that kind of rubbish. It's like, it's not important that there's one thing that a generation is doing. It's putting us in control of our own spending, where we want it to be and where we don't want it to be. And if you can just develop that as a habit, by the time you do get in a position where you can have a little bit more money, you're then in control of what you actually do. So for me, it's about the habits. It's about the psychology. Is it really that? It's like finance is a okay. The real version of this is it's 99% psychology and 1% numbers. The joke one I always say is 98% psychology, 1% numbers, and 1% not caring if it doesn't all add up. But it's like if you overcome your psychology, you're way ahead of people who don't do this, who are making more money and blowing it. And then when they have a bad month, when they lose, as you said, you have families that come from very well-to-do, but they're not in control and they just drop through. If you can build the good psychology, which costs nothing, when times get a little bit better, you'll be stronger to move ahead. And I think the best examples of that are in some of the people in the FIRE movement who had huge debt, and they established their own financial independence because they got used to saving when they were paying off their debt. And that habit of paying off debt meant they needed to take control of their spending. And then once they kind of got to zero, they didn't buy champagne. They were like, okay, now I want to have 25 times my annual spending. I'm going to push all the way through to financial independence.
That to me is one of the key, because I once heard a wise man I honored very much. He was talking about this concept of freedom with regards to money, because it's not about getting rich, it's about being free. And we all think, oh, well, we are free. But what he was pointing out, which really impacted me at the time, was if you've got debt, you're owned. If you've got a credit card, and trust me, I've spent my fair share of money on credit cards, but they own you. You can't stop working. You can't go on holiday. You can't do this. You can't do that, because they own you. And he called it a tithe. He said, you're tithing to the banks. Or if you prefer a tax, you're taxing to the banks. You're paying almost as much money to the banks as you are, in income tax or whatever. And the point about that, which really began to hit home, was he said, and they don't need your money. They're posting, £3 million of profit every quarter, and it's all your money, and it's the money that you're not spending on your, investing in yourself. They're taking it from you and your baked beans, and you're giving it to them. And he said, if you're buying a Domino's on a Friday, Domino's doesn't own you, the bank does, because that's not their money. Domino's have run away, they've made their money. It's great, Pizza Friday is great, but the bank is the one who's laughing to the bank, and the people who really pay for this are the poor. And it's us, who, I work for a charity, we struggle. But because of that, we spend our available income and we just gift it to the bank. We just gift it, that hurts. And so the issue about freedom is massive, because then you get this opportunity where you say, well, actually, you don't own me anymore. And if I choose to go on holiday when I'm 65 and I've saved enough money, I can. But if I choose not to, that's also okay, because you're not paying for it. And I don't have to worry about the bailiffs at the door. Not just me, but my broader family. We've really struggled with bailiffs over the years. And actually, in that context, it's like, hiding behind the sofas, the novelty wears off, and this is freedom from that. So I absolutely am an advocate for that. So if we're persuaded as adults, how do you talk to a 3-year-old about? I don't know how you're going to answer this, but I'm looking forward to it.
A 3-year-old is next to impossible. I mean, we have to face it. So where I would start is the moment I actually think financial literacy can start somewhere around the time of when kids can read and write, and they can do some basic maths. And I think then the perfect place is you start with playing shop, and then once you've got the kids playing shop and they're actually, classic old-fashioned, I buy this from you, you buy that, come in and handle the money and get used to the idea of what money is. But not what money is, one of the functions of money. I think then after that, it becomes more interesting to start teaching the kids, okay, but what if you were buying, so you're selling this to me, the customer, but what if you're buying this from mum at half the price you're charging me? How are you going to manage your, that's what shops do. Teach them that this is the way that business actually works. That, you buy something from mum for 50p, sell it to me for £1. You keep the 50p, then you buy maybe 2 of them tomorrow and start selling more, and start treat those very, very simple elements of just sort of market trading, of actually how to develop what a business is and what money is and how to manage it in that way. To me, I think that's actually a more positive method, than a more positive psychology than pocket money for chores, because then we're teaching people to work for other people. I think that's still okay to give a bit of pocket money for chores, but I think then with the pocket money for chores, there are these piggy banks where you've got 3 or 4 different categories of one is to spend later, one is to to go to investing, one is to go to charity, for example. And those kind of piggy banks, those are very useful to teach them, money isn't just there to go down the shop and buy sweets or video games or whatever it is kids spend it on now, or swords for inside their video game, probably, to actually teach them, how to manage that and how to think about money into the future. Those are all really positive. But actually, for me, I think that the most important thing that a parent can do for their child is just actually do it themselves. Don't show your kid you blowing all your money. Don't show your kid that you don't have a budget. Have a budget. Show your kid how you budget things. Don't say to them we can't afford it, and then see them walk away because they feel unloved. So actually, we can't afford it right now, but this is my budget. This is how I budget what we can afford, and I'm going to save for that, and we should be there then. But you can join in saving out of your pocket money if you want. Those kinds of just healthy, this is what money is, conversations are really useful. But then I think equally, I think a lot of it can be broached later on. I mean, I didn't work with my daughter. I felt like she had enough to do with school, to be quite honest. I didn't want to overload her on sort of money issues when she was young. And it was sort of 17 when I went for all of it. Because I think it's the really important stuff's not overly complicated. Track your spending, budget what you want to do, make sure you save before you do any of your spending. That goes into the investment account first before you do anything else. And you know what? Then it'll take care of itself. If you've done that part, that's pretty much everything right there. I mean, everything else is really sort of detail on top of those big important steps. I get into too many discussions, people saying, well, this, you could be investing in this or this or this. Like, come on, if you're investing, you're already so far ahead that, you know, don't worry about the detail, worry about getting that message into your kid.
How do you think how do we shift the conversation for our kids? Because often I you know, when I do parenting interventions with families, and parents often say, oh, well, I want to treat them like an adult. They're 8 years old. So I tell them, you know, that we're struggling to pay the mortgage this month or whatever. I'm like, do you know, they're not ready for this conversation. Yeah. And they're like, to be honest, I'm like, no, you're being damaging. And they're not ready for that. So how do you manage that balance between money is actually a liberator? There can be freedom there if it doesn't own you. You know, money can own any of us. You have to watch that. But at the same time, a lot of people get very anxious about money. It's often the root of a lot of mental health issues and so on for people that we're working with. How do you manage that balance so you're not engendering dread, if you like, in a 15-year-old or?
Yeah, that was why I didn't do it until she was older. I mean, I really did want to, because I also, my kids, it's really bad for someone in finance. My kids are really not very good at maths. And that's why she was a great editor of the book, because she'd get to a page and then part of the instruction was, tell me when you can't read it. And she'd come back, too many numbers. So it's really, and it's not a question of dumbing it down. It was just, I would just write it with numbers. And she would, no, that's just losing me. So we worked on that. But for that reason, I didn't want to, load things onto her that would be too hard and too psychologically difficult if it became sort of tied up with number blindness. So that's why I left it till late, and I think it's okay to leave it till late. I think the other thing is honesty. What's that great David Mitchell phrase? Dishonesty is the second best policy. It's the honesty. You don't want to be giving them adult problems to deal with.
No, I agree.
And I think there's a lot of other messaging that can go into that. I think one of the aspects I've dealt with people with is understanding what is the psychological hang-up. Your kid won't have a psychological hang-up with money unless you give it to them. So you have to, that's the most important thing you can do with your children, is just make sure you have positive conversations about money. And it's never tie it to anything rewarding them for love shown or any kind of emotion, trying to get tied away from emotions or any kind of upset.
Yeah, it's good.
And that's why I built it into a fairy tale as well. It's like, this is just light. Doesn't have to be overly dark and overly heavy. We can make it light, we can make it fun, and just have those sort of build those simple understandings of what is money anyway. And I pulled myself back from saying that earlier on with shops, because money is time and energy. That's what it is. We use it as a way of actually transferring time and energy. You get paid money because you put time and energy in.
Yeah.
When you buy something, it's someone else's time and energy that's gone into the thing you're buying. It's time and energy. And then to understand that you're going to want more of that when you're older, particularly energy, which is why you might want to save it up. And that when you invest it, you might get a lot more energy than you put in if you invest it well. And to understand those sort of simple concepts, so, okay, this is how we do this. This is not about, it's not love. It is not these negative emotions. It's not self-esteem in any way. It is just, as you were saying earlier on, it has the potential to make you financially free. Work on it towards that. But I think also one of the other, to older people as well, I mean, to parent, to actually, I think it's very important for them to overcome their psychological hang-ups about money too, before they have these conversations. And one of those will often be sort of guilt of not understanding money. One of the conversations I have with parents when they're in that stage and they don't want to talk to their kids, or they're nervous or even overly keen to do it. So you don't need to feel any guilt about this, because no one taught you. Right? If no one's taught you, it's not your responsibility to know it. Now we're trying to learn it. Let's try and learn it together. But don't come with guilt. Don't come with shame. Don't come with humiliation. This is someone else's fault that they chose not to teach us this when we were younger. Now let's build up the knowledge going forward and leave all that in the past. And I'd say probably the smartest thing to do is learn it with your kids. You know, it just really just gently actually go learn these things from the basics, from the ground up, and then teach your kids bit by bit.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking about the $7 a day principle. You know, even if you really, you know, you're really skint and you're on the breadline and it's baked beans for you, but if you can set aside 50p a day, now that might not make you a millionaire, but it does actually make you, I'm trying to do the maths in my head, but it makes you, you know, it's getting on for 3/4, you know, it's like 75, 80,000 pounds. And once you know that 50p a day does that little bit of freedom, well, a lot of kids' pocket money is about 50p a day, you know? And that is a lot of freedom, I think, you know. So I think the other thing about money that I've observed is there's no saying, you know, the love of money is the root of all evil. And this is not about money. As you were talking about earlier, it's about your time, and it's about your effort, and it's about your talents as well, actually, you know. But it's not about the money. The whole thing is not about the money. The whole thing is about your life and what do you do with it. And, you know, if there's a, you know, it releases you to go, I mean, if you want to play golf, you know, knock yourself out. But if you want to do something that actually means something, it releases you to do that. And I think often when when we talk about money, what we think is if I do this scheme or if I do that, there'll be a pile of gold at the end of the rainbow. And what I loved about your approach is it's not that. It's a pile of your time. It's a pile of being there for your kids as they grow older. It's a pile of you not being a slave to your employer when you're 68 and getting tired. You know, that's what you're actually working towards. And I don't think, you know, for many of us, $7 a day might seem a stretch, but, you know, as you said earlier, start small, start with what you can, just break those barriers in your head. And I think that's exciting. I think that's an exciting message to take to our kids, because at the moment they're quite worried. You know, that's the truth. Come out of COVID, and kids in Britain right now have lost a sense of hope. And, you know, without going too much into it, you know, there's this kind of sea of darkness for a lot of kids, and the mental health issues are just crashing through the roof. They're just going absolutely ballistic. And a lot of it can be tracked down to, I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. Yeah. And actually, if we begin to say, well, you can begin to control some of it. You can take some unknowns off the table. That dark cloud could be a little bit less dark, you know, by doing some stuff like this, particularly with our young people, as you say, 17 going through 25, where they're just feeling, I don't even know if I've got a career. I don't know what my job means. I don't know what that means. I don't know if I'll ever buy a house. Well, this begins to put that back into it. And I love that. It's been really, really informative listening to you, Michael. Thank you so much.
Good. I'm glad you like it. I mean, I'm glad you like exactly the reasons I like it. That it's not about becoming rich. You know, it really is just about having control over your life, and the idea that, you know, cutting back on your spending and saving more. There's a little bit in it, which is obvious, but I'd never thought about it until doing the book, was that if you spend nothing, you actually, you know, you don't need any savings at all. You're there already. And it's almost a sort of Zen concept. You know, you don't need anything. You could, if you had no need to spend any money, and then you could, as you sort of add the spending you really need onto it, then the sort of maybe that amount gets, you know, bigger and bigger. But we all start from the other end of like, oh, I'd like to live this life, but we don't need to. That's not what makes us genuinely happy. I talk to people about this regularly. It's like, if you actually did a list of all the times you're genuinely happy, it's probably not tied to money that closely. But the times you're really unhappy often are, because you don't have it and you've had to struggle to do something, or missed something you wanted to do because you had to work, or you had to make some money, you had to do X, Y, Z. And I think it's about untying those things and just saying, this is how you get to be free. Lots of money or not lots of money, just putting those tools into people's hands is what matters.
It's been a delight being with you. Been a real delight, Michael. Thank you. I wish you well. So we're just unmasking the $7 millionaire right here. Good to meet you, Michael. Please do get his book. Please do get his book. Happy Ever After: Financial Freedom Isn't a Fairy Tale. You can do that too.